In this video, we want to talk briefly about the glycocalyx and the extracellular matrix and how they form a hydrogel. Let's start down here at the bottom right where I drew two epithelial cells. And those epithelial cells are polar in that the two ends are different. All epithelia are bound on one end, that's the basal end of the cell, and free on the other end, that's referred to as the apical end of the cell. And those epithelia often have cell surface adaptations known as microvilli or cilia. And that's what we would see here. I've drawn them here. But also they're blown up over here on our left in our photomicrograph. And what we see on the surface of those microvilli are these protruding proteoglycans, a protein associated with carbohydrates that these are polar substances, both proteins and carbohydrates, and in this case it's a dual molecule that has both components, and therefore they are hydrated, forming a gel. So the glycocalyx, shown over here, is a bit like grass growing on the surface of these epithelial cells and other cells, and it forms this hydrated layer, gelatinous layer on the surface of the cell. Now, the glycocalyx has been found to have numerous functions in cell-cell recognition and immunity and a whole variety of other things. But for our purposes today, we just want to focus on the fact that extracellular proteins and carbohydrates lead to the formation of bound water, which generates a hydrogel. And so we have this hydrated glycocalyx, and on the other end, the basal end of the cell, we get secretion of proteins known as the extracellular matrix. Now, this is true in an epithelial tissue, but even more so true in tissues like connective tissues, where the extracellular matrix is actually the largest component of the tissue. It's actually a cell-sparse tissue, if you will. The extracellular matrix provides the majority of the characteristics of that tissue. And that's comprised of secreted proteins like collagen and elastin, as well as polysaccharides known as glycosaminoglycans. An example there would be hyaluronan. Well, again, we have proteins and carbohydrates, which are polar, and therefore interacting with our polar water molecules, forming a hydrogel. And so overall, we have this hydrated glycocalyx. We have a hydrated hydrogel in our interstitial space, this extracellular matrix. And that's important because, number one, it tends to, especially in this extracellular matrix region, tends to oppose the gravitational movement of water. When we're standing, our interstitial fluids are not flowing downward towards our hands and feet. That's important. And it's also important in that it increases the viscosity of the interstitium, therefore limiting diffusion to some degree, right? Viscosity affects diffusion rates, and of course the formation of a hydrogel would tend to impede diffusion to some degree. Now, of course, diffusion is still very good between blood vessels, through the interstitium, to these cells, but the formation of a hydrogel is impeding it to some degree.